Everyone saw the smiles. Few heard what Robert Redford truly thought of Paul Newman, about trust, loyalty, and a closeness some still whisper might have been bigger than friendship. Redford almost never put big feelings on a microphone. When Newman died in 2008, he sent one line that felt like a locked door. "There is a point where feelings go beyond words. I have lost a real friend. My life and this country is better for his being in it." Short, almost austere, and exactly him. The man who built Sundance believed the deepest truths didn't need a spotlight, they needed proof. So what were his real thoughts? Look at the choices. Newman didn't just co-star with Redford, he made Redford possible at the highest level. During the casting of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the studio hedged on Redford. Newman backed him, and the gamble changed 2 careers and a generation's idea of buddy chemistry. Their trust on screen wasn't an accident. It started the day Newman stuck his neck out. Redford never bragged about that debt, but he paid it forward for decades, turning his own clout into a ladder for other artists. That's not sentiment, that's standard. And behind the calm public image, their private rhythm had teeth. Newman prized discipline and punctuality. Redford prized precision and patience. They kept each other honest with jokes that only work when the bond is bulletproof. The most famous, Redford sent Newman a crushed Porsche as a gag. The prank escalated over the years like a secret language of mutual respect. You don't tease at that level unless you trust the floor won't give. Redford admired Newman's steelcraft over hype, generosity without ceremony, and answered it with the same. If you want the surprising part of Redford's thoughts, it's this. He believed their myth wasn't theirs to spend. Fans begged for a reunion. They said no for years unless a script rose to meet what they'd built. Newman even said it out loud. No great script, no third film. Redford's silence here spoke volumes. Protecting the story was protecting the friendship. Better no encore than a cheap one. The closest they came to a final goodbye was a walk in the woods. Redford developed it for the two of them. A gentle last hike through time. When Newman's health declined, Redford shelved the project because he couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. Years later, he made it with Nick Nolte, but never pretended it was the same. That decision, wait then let go, says more about his heart than any interview. Loyalty over momentum, legacy over marketing. So when Redford finally put words on Newman, he kept them spare and kept living the subtext. His actions were the message: use your leverage to lift others, keep the myth clean, and don't turn private truth into public spectacle. If there was more between them, it lived between choices, not headlines. And the first time Newman opened a door for Redford, Redford learned the rule he'd follow for life: earn the story or don't tell it. But the part most people miss is how one phone call from Newman didn't just start a partnership, it rewired Redford's entire future. Before the poster on every dorm wall, there was hesitation. Studios loved the idea of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but not everyone was sold on Robert Redford as Sundance. He wasn't yet the automatic yes, Paul Newman was. And what Newman did next is the part people forget. He spent his capital. He backed Redford quietly, firmly, without fanfare, and that one decision rerouted 2 careers and rewired a decade of American movies. This wasn't a sentimental favor. It was a read on talent and temperament. Newman saw that Redford had the unusual gear you can't teach, the ability to say more by holding back. On the page, Sundance is the cooler current under Butch's charm. On camera, that requires someone who can withhold without going blank. Redford had that. He could keep the frame calm while the audience leans forward to hear what he isn't saying. Newman understood the power of that contrast, and he trusted it enough to fight for it. From day one, their working language was trust. Director George Roy Hill pushed for specificity, rhythm, timing, that dry crosstalk no one could fake. Redford matched Newman's pace beat for beat. The easy reading is chemistry, the truer reading is discipline. 2 ultra-prepared actors hitting marks like musicians, letting silence carry the punchlines, never stepping on each other's oxygen. Off camera, they needled each other to stay sharp. On camera, they made space. That balance, room to play without letting the scene get sloppy, became the blueprint fans now romanticize as effortless. Redford never turned this moment into a speech, but his later choices tell you how he processed it. When someone spends their reputation on you, you earn it. You show up early. You know the lines. You protect the tone. That ethic became Redford's North Star. It's why he was comfortable being the quiet half of a legendary duo. He wasn't chasing share of spotlight. He was chasing integrity of story. He'd rather underplay than mug. He'd rather cut a big moment that rings false than keep it for applause. The ripple effect came fast. After Butch Cassidy, the town wanted a rematch. They got the sting. Same director, new con, effortless grace. What looks like lightning striking twice was really a standard being enforced. Redford had clocked the way Newman chose material. Start with script spine, not sizzle. If the engine isn't clean, don't drive the car. That's why their second outing feels like a different flavor of the same honesty. Yes, it's charming. No, it's never cheap. There's a practical layer to the call, too. Newman didn't just open a door. He modeled how to walk through it. He showed Redford how to navigate studios without getting cynical. Keep the work first, be generous without being a pushover, and build a life outside the soundstage so that fame never gets to define you. Redford watched how Newman kept racing, philanthropy, and family threaded through the career, and he took notes. Years later, that template is visible in everything from Redford's environmental fights to the way Sundance was designed as an incubator, not a billboard. And yet, the part that still surprises people is how unsentimental Redford's gratitude was. He didn't perform it. He practiced it. He mirrored Newman's investment by investing in others, reading scripts for young filmmakers, using his name to shield fragile projects, sharing the credibility he'd been given. That was the quiet payback. No press tour required. Their private rhythm carried edges that kept the work honest. Newman valued punctuality. Redford valued precision. If either slipped, the other nudged. The nudges could be jokes, pranks, a raised eyebrow, whatever fit, but the underlying message never changed. Don't coast because the world thinks you two are iconic. Be worthy of the word together every single time you share a frame. That's also why fans asking, "When's the reunion?" never got the easy yes. The bar had been set by the call that started it all. You don't spend that kind of trust on a script that's merely decent. Newman knew it. Redford lived it. They weren't protecting their image. They were protecting the story people carried out of the theater. Protecting the feeling you get when the last scene lands and you realize you've been watching two pros refuse to lie to you. So yes, one phone call changed Redford's life, but the real change was what he expected from himself after it. He wasn't just grateful, he was accountable. To Newman, to the audience, to the work. And that's the standard that shaped everything that came next. The projects he chased, the projects he refused, and the one almost goodbye he built for the two of them, and then shelved when fate said no. And inside that standard lived the question fans kept asking for decades. Why didn't the reunion happen, and how close did they actually get? If the iconic photos look effortless, the friendship wasn't. It was maintained like a race car, like a great cut through tiny disciplined choices. Newman valued punctuality and preparation. Redford valued precision and restraint. Together they built a quiet pact, no coasting. If one of them drifted, the other applied pressure. Sometimes that pressure was a straight look that said again. Sometimes it was a joke so elaborate it became legend. The crushed Porsche prank, the running gags, the dry one-liners that traveled faster than any press release. The mischief wasn't decoration. It was a pressure valve. It said, "We can tease because we trust the foundation." On set, the standard showed up in the negative space. Neither tried to steal scenes. They made room. Redford would shave away a gesture if it stole oxygen from Newman's beat. Newman would adjust timing to let Redford's silence land. They traded the spotlight like pros trade passes. Eyes up, ego down. The result looked like chemistry, but it was really generosity disguised as cool. Off-set, they swapped a different kind of currency. Notes. Not grand speeches. Surgical comments. Cut that line. Hold the look 2 seconds longer. The joke's better if you don't smile. Redford admired Newman's intolerance for bloat. Newman admired Redford's ability to communicate without underlining. Each pushed the other toward cleaner choices. If a scene smelled like effort, they stripped it. If a beat felt sentimental, they cooled it. The rule wasn't be likable. The rule was be true. The competition between them was real, but it never turned petty. It sharpened them. If Newman landed the moment of the day, Redford didn't try to top it with volume. He answered with exactness. If Redford found a gear of stillness the camera loved, Newman didn't crowd it. He pivoted to texture, finding humor in the margins. Think of it as dueling craftsmanship, not dueling egos. They didn't chase applause, they chased honesty, and audiences felt the difference. Around the work, there was life. Families, causes, obsessions. Newman had racing, Redford had the mountains. That mattered. It gave them gravity outside the studio, which is why the studio never owned them. They could walk away from bad scripts because they weren't starving for validation. Redford respected how Newman handled fame as a tool, not an identity. Newman respected how Redford protected privacy like a craft decision. The private center made the public partnership durable. The pranks weren't random, they were signposts. A joke that intricate takes time, planning, and an assumption the other guy will love the effort. It's a form of saying, I see you, and I know exactly how to make you laugh. That's intimacy without the speeches. It also maintained a crucial balance. Keep the work serious. Keep ourselves light. When pressure spikes, laughter keeps the hands steady. They were aligned on something fans rarely talk about: taste. Good material over easy wins. They could have chained out brand extensions of their duo, but they refused to repeat themselves just because the market wanted it. That's why the myth stayed clean. They didn't spend it casually. If the project wasn't worthy of the friendship, pass. That shared discipline is the unglamorous reason their collaborations age so well. You can rewatch them without wincing. Mentorship ran both ways and then outward. Newman pulled Redford through a door early. Redford learned the move and later performed it for others. They compared notes on where to place their weight: on craft, on philanthropy, on helping the next person lift. The ego cost of that is higher than people think. It means losing some immediate credit in exchange for longer shadows cast by better work. There's also the question everyone whispers: did the bond ever cross into something beyond friendship? Redford's posture tells you why we'll never get a tabloid answer. He kept the loudest truth private. If there was more, it lived in decisions. The scripts they refused, the projects they tried to build for both of them, the way they shielded what mattered from being turned into content. In a town that monetizes intimacy, they chose to keep the center unpriced. That choice is itself a message. In the end, their standard created a paradox. The cooler the duo looked, the harder they were working to make it look that easy. The smiles were earned, the pauses were engineered. The friendship was maintained like a craft, kept sharp with jokes, guarded by boundaries, and measured not in headlines but in the discipline of what they did and did not do together. Which brings us to the question the fans never stopped asking: if the bond was that strong, why didn't they give us one more film, and how close did they actually come? Fans wanted the easy answer: schedules, egos, money. The real answer was harder and more honest. They refused to spend the myth. After Butch Cassidy and The Sting, every reunion pitch had to clear a bar most scripts never even saw. Newman said it out loud years later: if the material wasn't undeniable, there was no point. Redford agreed. They weren't guarding image, they were guarding meaning. First, the script problem. A buddy film isn't two stars sharing a frame, it's a rhythm, setups, reversals, quiets that feel earned. Too many drafts they read were riffs on nostalgia: wink at the past, reheat the banter, send everyone home smiling. That's exactly what they wouldn't do. They wanted a story with stakes, not a scrapbook. If a writer couldn't give them a moral engine, why these men, why now? Then the charm would feel like cosplay. They would rather leave the last freeze frame untouched than license a hollow echo. Second, timing. The 1970s gave them freedom, the 1980s and beyond gave them gravity. Newman dove deeper into racing and philanthropy. Redford added directing, producing, and the growing ecosystem that became Sundance. Real careers don't move in parallel lines, they braid, drift, and collide. Every time the stars almost aligned, one was mid-shoot or mid-edit or mid-season on a cause they wouldn't abandon. If you've ever tried to schedule two people with full lives, you know the math. Windows shrink, quality demands expand, years blur. Third, standards age upward. The older they got, the more they insisted on truth over tone. A late-life Redford-Newman movie couldn't just reprise the old surface charm, capers cool. It had to face time. What does loyalty cost after decades? What breaks? What bends? They knew the audience would feel any dodge instantly. If a script flinched from that honesty, they passed. Fourth, the trap of brand logic. Hollywood loves to turn electricity into a product line. These two didn't. They'd already watched lesser reunions flatten great partnerships into merch. Saying no wasn't stubbornness, it was craft governance. It protected the memory people actually loved. Two actors who never lied to them. They wouldn't start now. Fifth, private boundaries. Their closeness, whatever label you put on it, wasn't content. They wouldn't parade it to juice a pitch. If anything, the deeper the bond, the tougher the filter. Some things deserved to stay unpriced. A reunion that profited off the friendship without honoring it would feel like a betrayal of the very thing fans wanted to celebrate. And still, they looked. They kept reading. They kept asking whether there was one story left that earned the weight they carried together. The answer kept coming back the same, almost. You can hear the echo of that word in interviews. Hopeful, then careful, then quiet. Hopeful because they wanted to work together again. careful because the bar was the bar, quiet because at a certain point talking about it louder wouldn't make the pages better. When Newman's health began to turn, the calculus changed, but the principle didn't. If they were going to meet on screen again, it had to feel like two men telling the truth about time. That's why Redford's restraint reads as respect, not reluctance. He wasn't protecting a poster, he was protecting trust. The trust you feel when a scene lands and your chest lifts because the film didn't take the easy way out. So no, it wasn't money. It wasn't ego. It was a standard that never blinked. And paradoxically, that no is what kept their yeses immortal. 2 films, no filler, 0 dilution. But there was one project that came closer than all the rest. A road they built for 2 and nearly walked together. If there was ever a script that could have earned their history, it was this one. 2 old friends on the Appalachian Trail, testing knees, memory, and the distance between what they were and what they still are. Redford saw A Walk in the Woods as a late-life duet. Less caper, more confession. He didn't picture a reprise of Cool. He pictured candor, the jokes that cover fear, the silences that admit it. For once, the plot was time itself. He developed it for Newman, not just with him in mind. The roles fit like a well-worn jacket. One man pragmatic and flinty, the other sly and impulsive, both carrying miles of unspoken gratitude. It would have been the perfect third act. No costumes to hide behind, no con to distract, just the hard truth of aging handled with their trademark restraint. You can feel why Redford pushed. The film could honor what they'd protected by refusing easy sentiment and letting the audience do the last bit of feeling. Then reality arrived. Newman's health started to slide. The pact about standards didn't dissolve. It tightened. Redford shelved the project because a workaround would betray the very point of the movie. If the film was about facing time honestly, you don't recast the partner the story was built to face it with. Waiting wasn't indecision. It was loyalty. And when waiting turned into no, Redford didn't spin it. He let the absence stand where a reunion should have been. Sometimes the most honest scene is the one you never shoot. Years later, he finally made A Walk in the Woods with Nick Nolte. It's amiable, funny, and often touching. But Redford never pretended it replaced what he planned. The Newman version would have carried a different voltage, a history you can't fake, the kind of shorthand that makes a 2-second glance feel like a chapter. The point isn't to downgrade what exists, it's to underline why Redford paused for so long. He believed their myth wasn't a prop, it was a responsibility. If the film couldn't tell the truth of 2 men who'd walked a lifetime together, he'd rather keep that truth unfilmed than sell a substitute. That's the surprising part of Redford's thoughts on Newman. They live less in quotes than in filters. The projects he greenlit, the ones he passed on, and the one he built for 2 and then refused to counterfeit. Protect the friendship, protect the audience's memory, protect the meaning. Which is why, when the goodbye finally came, Redford chose almost no words at all. Just a line that hid more than it said. When Paul Newman died, Redford didn't deliver a eulogy tour. He offered a single clean line. There is a point where feelings go beyond words. I have lost a real friend. My life in this country is better for his being in it. That wasn't vagueness, it was a boundary. Redford believed big feelings don't get truer when you make them louder. He kept the door mostly closed and then let his choices do the talking. Read that sentence with the rest of his life in view and it sharpens. Beyond words doesn't mean nothing to say. It means don't cheapen what's sacred. The friendship had already been expressed in the currency they both trusted: risk, standards, and restraint. Newman spent his reputation to get Redford through the door on Sundance. Redford spent decades honoring that by protecting scripts, protecting tone, and protecting the myth from lazy sequels. When Redford finally spoke, he chose a sentence that refused spectacle and pointed, instead, to impact, not just on him, but on the country, craft that shaped culture, philanthropy that moved money, integrity that traveled. Privately, his actions decoded the subtext. He amplified younger voices the way Newman once amplified him, reading, mentoring, shielding fragile films from the weather of hype. He treated gratitude as an ethic, not a posture. That's why his public comments stayed spare. The more loudly you perform devotion, the less room you leave to practice it. Redford's surprised thought about Newman is really a rule for love and loyalty in public. Hold back on the microphone so you can go all in on the work. There's also the ghost line inside that statement: I won't let you turn this into content. He knew what happens when a partnership becomes a product. He and Newman beat that trap twice on screen, by choosing truth over novelty, and he wasn't going to lose the third time by narrating their bond for clicks. If there was more between them than friendship labels, rumors, the thing people still whisper, he chose to keep it unpriced. The boundary wasn't coyness, it was care. You protect what you can't replace. Look at what he didn't say. He didn't list memories, tally favors, or describe private rooms that were never meant for public light. He went small on language and big on meaning: friend, life, country. Those nouns carry weight because he left space around them. Redford trusted the audience to feel the rest, to remember the glances on camera, the discipline off camera, the way both men refused to lie for applause. He trusted us to know that some truths are clearest when you stop trying to pin them to the table. Even years later, when asked to reflect, he kept circling the same North Star: loyalty without spectacle, excellence without noise. That's why his silence never read as distance. It read as respect for Newman, for the audience, for the line between public story and private soul. And in the end, that's the most revealing thought of all: the deeper the bond, the tighter the edit. Which is why, after Redford's own passing, the tributes that landed hardest didn't shout, they echoed the same code he lived by. When Robert Redford left, the tributes didn't sound like press releases. They sounded like acknowledgments, people confirming what he'd spent a lifetime hinting at. Colleagues talked about his steadiness, his allergy to vanity, and the way he protected the work from the noise. Friends remembered the dry humor and the sharper standard. And from the Newman side, the message felt like a mirror: gratitude for a man who didn't just share frames with Paul, but shared a code: craft over spectacle, loyalty over headlines, and a refusal to cash out the myth for one more easy win. What landed hardest wasn't the superlatives, it was the specifics. Filmmakers told stories about Redford reading a script nobody else had time for, making a phone call that changed the temperature of a meeting, or quietly steering a fragile movie through a storm without asking for credit after. That's the same currency Newman once spent on him: reputation as scaffolding, not spotlight. Redford's surprising thoughts on Newman turn out to be measurable. He lived them forward. You could feel the through line in the way people described his taste. He championed projects for what they were, not who was in them. He loved silence when it carried truth. He distrusted sentimentality that arrived prepackaged. He believed late work should face time honestly. That's the ethic he learned standing next to Newman, two actors who never asked the audience to pretend. And that's the ethic he handed to the next generation. Don't flatter, don't fake, don't hurry the beat where the meaning lands. There were small human portraits too. A familiar table he kept, the habit of leaving rooms a little kinder than he found them, the way he listened more than he spoke. None of it flashy. All of it consistent with the man who, when pressed to define the bond with Newman, chose brevity over performance. If there was more between them than the public could label, he honored it the only way that wouldn't cheapen it: by letting it shape his boundaries, not his brand. In industry memorials, the duo was framed less as two cool guys and more as a standard of how to be famous without becoming a mascot. Newman modeled it first: have a life outside the lens, put your weight behind something bigger than you, treat attention like a tool. Redford made it policy. Together, even in absence, they read like a double entry in the same ledger: proof that charisma earns trust only when it's backed by discipline. The most telling echoes came from people whose names aren't on posters: the writers and first-time directors who described a door opening where they expected a wall. That generosity is the long answer to the short sentence Redford offered when Newman died. Beyond words didn't mean say nothing. It meant do something. Invest. Risk your name. Build the greenhouse, then step aside and let other people grow inside it. And maybe that's why the final image people reach for isn't a red carpet. It's a corridor, quiet, steady, a hand guiding someone else toward a room they didn't know they were allowed to enter. Redford's thoughts on Newman before his own death live in that gesture. Keep faith with the story. Protect the bond from being turned into a product. Let the work, not the gossip, carry the meaning. So when you look at the legacy now, the surprise isn't that the friendship was deep. It's that the depth is visible without confession. It's there in what they refused, in what they almost made, and in what the rest of us are still watching, because two men decided the audience deserved the truth. Which is exactly where we'll leave it, by pulling the camera back one last time and asking what we're supposed to do with a standard this high. The secret isn't hidden in a confession. It's in a standard. If the work isn't worthy of the friendship, don't do it. Redford's final word on Newman was brevity. His real message was discipline. Protect the story. Earn the myth. And when words fall short, let actions speak.